what needs to happen on the budget and national debt? I know it's not a kind of the question, if I were to ask the question, if Mark Warner had the ability to craft the perfect solution, what would you say? Because really you have to then work with other senators, other House members, or president. But what needs to happen to?
What you gotta have is you gotta have a real plan that'll knock between $4 and $5 trillion off the debt in the next 10 years. You've got to have a mix of entitlement reform, and you've got to have a mix of tax reform that will generate more revenues. You can't just keep cutting the one little piece of the pie, domestic discretionary spending. You've got to have some ratio, whether it's 2-to-1 in cuts over revenue, or 50-50 is a matter of debate, but there's got to be some, it's probably got to be slightly more on the cut side than on the revenue side. But the revenue piece has got to be a pretty solid number. The data point that I like to remind folks is that federal spending is at 25% of our GDP, revenues are at 15%. You got a 10-point spread there. The only time over the last 70 years we've had a budget balance or any minimum surplus has been when revenues and surplus and revenues and expenditures have been roughly at that 20% level. So if you're at 25, and you're raising 15, and history has shown you need to be close to 20, that means you gotta,
Move in from both sides.
Move in from both sides. And whether it's roughly 50-50, the biggest growth is going to be on the expenditure side in terms of entitlement spending, not the next 10 years, the following 10 years. So some of this is prophylactic. If you start now, you get the real benefits 10, 12, 15 years out. But this is a journey that it doesn't get any easier, because every day we fail to act, we add $4.5 billion to that debt, because we continue to borrow to pay for our current spending, and that just goes into the debt pile that if we had an interest rate increase would be devastating to our country.
I have to ask, with the backdrop this week, the Supreme Court hearing arguments in the case involving healthcare reform, Senate House President signed off on this a couple of years ago. In fact, the anniversary was last week, the 2-year anniversary. So I don't really know what you might be doing in terms of monitoring this, keeping staff, having staff keep you abreast, but essentially, where does it stand as far as you, as a senator, is concerned?
Here's a couple of things. The healthcare reform bill was very imperfect. It didn't put enough cost containment in there. There were parts that I'd like to change, a lot of parts of it. But I'd still think it was better than the alternative of doing nothing. The status quo, I know, is going to bankrupt the country. The idea that we're going to pay for our health care in America based upon the volume of health care you get, the number of times you go to see a doctor, the number of times you go to the hospital, the number of times you get a prescription filled. And that the incentives actually for hospitals, for example, said if the person keeps getting re-sick and readmitted, that actually helps their bottom line. That just couldn't work long term. So I voted for an imperfect bill because I knew it would shake up the system. I think the jury's out whether it will actually help or hurt. I think it'll still help, but it's still, the jury is out. I acknowledge that. What is frustrating is a couple of things. One, there are a series of areas in the bill that need to be changed. In a traditional legislative battle like this, after Congress passes any kind of major legislation, usually they come back 2 years, 3 years after the fact, and let's fix the parts we got wrong. But the political climate now is either you got to repeal it or you can't touch it at all. And that's an imperfect solution, because there are parts that need to be fixed. Second, I do think, and I think I've talked with lots of folks like at Carilion in the Valley and in the Roanoke Valley. I've talked to a lot of insurance companies. I've talked to lots of doctor groups. This bill and the changes that will take place in 2014 are forcing discussions and decisions to be made that have been talked about in healthcare for a decade, but are now starting to change, where people are thinking, how do we actually pay doctors, hospitals, nurses, drug companies based on your outcome, not on the volume of care you get. That is the most important reform that we need to take place. And I think the pressure of this change is forcing these decisions to move forward.
I have to ask about energy policy. Obviously, people, every time they fill their gas tank up, including me this morning, we recognize that gas prices are a lot higher. We know there are a lot of factors in that have nothing to do with what Congress can control, the President can control. What though, and yet voters still want some action that seems to be ongoing, maybe to at least make us feel a little bit better that you guys up here are cognizant of that. What can be done? Short term, I know that probably not much, but what can we do to?
Well, there are a couple of things we can do. One is I think we can continue with our allies to promote a peaceful resolution of some of the issues we've got in the Middle East. Because a lot of the spike in oil prices now are due to the threat that there could be more conflict in the Middle East. Second thing we can do is we should go ahead and take the step towards getting ourselves off of, particularly on gas, oil-based fuels. I think we've made some strides with electric vehicles. We've got to keep pushing those. But I actually think one of the areas right now that we've got a great opportunity is to use liquefied natural gas as a fuel. Particularly, we got to start with 18-wheeler trucks. You know, the big trucks that run up and down 81. I think with slight incentives, you could convert or allow there to be a natural gas pump at every gas station and give an incentive to change the fuel mix very quickly for big trucks. There was actually legislation on that recently that would have jump-started. I think we need an energy policy that isn't all of the above, that says we're going to do nuclear, we're going to continue to look at ways we can burn coal cleaner, we're going to do oil and gas, but we're going to move on wind and solar and biofuels and electrification of vehicles, energy conservation. That this is not a, you're either for fossil fuels or you're not. It really needs to be an all of the above. I still believe that the threat of climate change is real, so I think, in the long run, we need to find ways to burn fuels that are cleaner and more fuel efficient. But I think in terms of short term, the goal is, if you do that all of the above energy policy, I think that will take off some of the pressure. But as you said at the outset, it's not like America is paying a significantly higher price for gas than anybody else in the world is. It is due to, this is a worldwide commodity. People in India, people in China, people in Europe are still paying that same $105 or $106 a barrel price that we're paying in America.